Hey guys, it's Mia, and today I'm going to be giving you a little tutorial on how to make some trinket trays. I don't know why I just sang that. That was interesting. We're going to ignore it. So this piece is going to pop in and out of the video a few times because it's my little demo piece. Before we get started though, I'd like to tell you about a few brands of clay I've tried. There's only two, but this is a piece I made using DOS air dry clay. As you see, it's still pretty intact. Looks fine. It's covered in resin, so that's why it's pretty sturdy, but I also made it a ring holder. I decided to demonstrate that to you. I didn't realize that until right now. So now we're going to move on. I made this piece out of Crayola air dry clay. I used Crayola air dry clay from the beginning, and my pieces started to turn out like this. This is even glazed in resin too. Here's a piece not glazed in resin, but as you see on the back, it's cracked. It's just not what I want. So for this, I'm going to use DOS air dry clay because I want my pieces to last for a long time. Here's that little demo tray again, and the great thing about clay is you can use the same technique to make a rectangle one. So I'm going to start out with a lump of clay and adding some water to it because my clay is a little bit dry, and it also helps with conditioning. I also use a silicone mat on the bottom, but you can even use like a Ziploc bag for the base or parchment paper, and that'll ensure that it doesn't stick. And here we have a wonderful guest appearance by my cat, and you will see him a few times moving forward because he likes to be on my desk. So usually you wouldn't have to condition the clay that much, but mine was a little bit older. I'm trying to use up some of the stuff I have, so that's why it's kind of like taking me a little longer. But usually if it's fresh out of the package or even a little bit after, it won't be that much work. So now I'm taking this acrylic roller I have and just rolling it out, trying to make sure I'm keeping the same amount of pressure on each side so it can come out even, and then just folding it, rolling it, folding it, rolling it until I get the section that I'd like to cut out, which apparently looks like this section. I probably next time would have gone for a little bit of a smoother one, but this part's just a demo, so I'm not actually creating something out of this. So just peel off the edges, and also if you don't have a cookie cutter, you can draw a circle on a piece of paper, cut it out, and then you can use an X-Acto knife to cut that out. Or just freehand it if you're good at drawing circles. So now I'm going to smooth out the rough pieces, and sometimes if there's a big hole like that one over there, you can add extra pieces of clay and kind of try to fill it in. Basically, you're just going to use your hands and some water and just kind of smooth everything out until it looks how you want it to. So this part's a little bit tricky and tedious. It's not too hard, but it just takes a minute. So you're kind of just going to fold up the edges like how I'm doing here. It's okay if it looks a little ugly for a second. We're going to smooth it out. And after you fold it up, you want to take a little bit of water on your finger and kind of just push around the edges and try to smooth them out to where the pieces are still coming up, but it doesn't look as lumpy as it does right now. This part's a little bit hard to explain, so I recommend just watching and trying to see what works best for you. And wow, by magic, it's done. And we're going to act like that piece of clay is in my other hand. So let's go back with magic again to our not dry piece of clay. So I'm going to show you how I make the little letter divots. So I basically just kind of push into the clay, as you kind of see here. This part's a little self-explanatory. I'm just using the little pushing motion and kind of pushing in those extra little pieces of clay that came up while I was carving it. Also, if you don't want a divot like this in your clay, you can definitely use the dotting tool and just use paint once it's dry to do that. But I personally like this better, but you definitely don't have to. This is where I made a little bit of a mistake and grabbed a paintbrush that's for paint and not a paintbrush that's for clay, which is why that water was green. Yeah, so don't do that. Make sure you keep them separate. But here I'm just going with a little water on a paintbrush and smoothing out those little pieces, and then I even use my finger a little to kind of do that type of motion. Okay, so the next step, I didn't do a good job at getting a video of it, but I'm going to tell you, As the drying process is going on, I use that same dotting tool to kind of really enforce those divots, but don't really press deeper, just kind of making sure they're smoother. Sorry for this boring background, but you know, I had to tell you. So now we are going to go into the painting part. I start with gesso, and you can kind of think of this as a primer for the paint, except it wouldn't come out of the bottle. Eventually I got it out, way too much though. But as I was saying, gesso is basically like a primer. It kind of makes it easier and smoother for the paint to go on, and it just gives you a really fresh start. But it's not a necessary step. You can totally just use even white paint as a base. To get into these divots, I'm kind of just pushing my paintbrush down. It's probably really bad for the paintbrush, but that's the method I've found best to getting the paint in there and not just having it sit on top. So we're going to speed up this part a little bit because I take a really long time to paint this little teeny tiny demo tray. Alright, we are back from the gesso drying, and I'm just going to go in with my normal acrylic paint now on top of the gesso. And this actually took me 2 coats, but with the gesso it makes it a lot easier to get on there. 2 coats later, and I'm back. So now we're going to fill in those little words. And I'm taking this dotting tool and kind of loading it up with paint as I'm kind of showing you here. And basically I'm just going to fill in the letters. Again, if you didn't want to do the divots, this is the part where you would just hand write the letters. But I find it easier to carve it and then put the paint after. It kind of gives me a little marking of where to go. But if you're good at painting with a dotting tool, freehand, totally go for it. I'm going to go ahead and speed this section up a little bit because it takes a minute, and I think you kind of get the gist of it. Just taking the paint, filling in the letters, and don't worry about being too perfect with it. We can always go in with our base color after and kind of fix up those small imperfections. Now that I've finished the letters, I'm going to go in and add some little decorations. I'm back after decorating. So I did fix those little imperfections with my base color. I realized I wasn't recording when I did it though. And now we're gonna say hello to our first demo tray. Hey again. So now we're gonna finish her up and glaze it. I use UV resin. I know not everyone's a big fan of UV resin, but I just haven't found another good alternative, but I will definitely update you if I do find one. So basically you're just gonna put it on the back and use a paintbrush. Make sure this is only for resin and make sure it's not super fancy because unfortunately you're probably not going to get it back. And you're just going to brush it along. So now it's evenly covered with resin. I'm going to use a lighter and pop those bubbles. You could also blow through a straw if you don't have a lighter. Now we're going to set it outside in the sun and leave it for about 30 minutes. Wow, and just like that, it's dry. As you see, it's really glossy, really sturdy, and it's ready to hold anything you need it to. thank you guys for sticking along through this, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. Thanks for watching.